Good afternoon. All the best to Warsaw. I hope you've been doing well there. My name is Michal Nekvasil, and I'm working for the DG CLIMA, DG Climate Action of the European Commission. And yeah, I'm very pleased to be with you, at least virtually. So next slide, please. So let me first start talking about my experience very briefly. I spent, besides others, 4 beautiful years in Georgia, in between 2007 2011, and already at that time we did deal a lot with climate change adaptation. At that time, from the European Commission delegation, where I worked together with then the Minister of the Environment of Georgia, we put together all the key documents, all the environmental action plans and the strategies, etc., etc. We also discussed disaster risk reduction at that time. As a matter of fact, at that time, one of Georgian NGOs counted that all the money or the impact, financial impact of disasters in Georgia in a given year were superior to the overall national budget. Yeah? So just to emphasize the importance of climate change adaptation, we organized Climate Week, the first Climate Week then, I think 2009. We're talking about landslides in Tusheti and the synergic effects of the overgrazing there and the heavy rains that caused the landslides, about water scarcity in Vashlovani region, about melting of glaciers in Svaneti, and we were having all kinds of projects to address these issues. At the same time, we're working quite a bit also in Armenia and Azerbaijan, not only with what is called Regional Environmental Center Caucasus. So regards not only to my fellow Georgians, but also to all of us, all of you in the rooms, and let's continue with more about how the EU addresses adaptation. So next slide, please. So when it comes to the adaptation strategy of the European Union, it was already mentioned by my colleague from DG NEAR. It was adopted a little bit more than 2 years ago, and the idea is basically to make Europe not only climate neutral, as we say in the climate law, but also climate resilient. And there are basically four ways how to address it. One is making the adaptation smarter. So that's all about knowledge, data, etc. More systemic, about supporting policy developments, then faster, about speeding up the overall process, and then what relates mostly to you is stepping up the international action for climate resilience. And I'll demonstrate one and each of these issues on the following slides. So next one, please. When it comes to smarter adaptation, we have, besides others, what is called the European Climate and Health Observatory, launched approximately 2 years ago. The idea there is to help public authorities anticipate and prevent climate-related threats to health, and also to help public surveillance, forecasting, early warning systems, etc. So a very topical issue, not only related to COVID. Next slide, please. Copernicus is our, let's say, science fiction, not maybe science fiction, but the most advanced baby on the block. There we try basically to simulate, to make a digital model of the Earth and monitor. So on the basically the idea of the policy support facility is to support at this time not the central level, but rather municipalities and regions to increase the local regional resilience. We've got already 9 projects running on disaster risk reduction, and you would be able to also join it in your countries under the Covenant of Mayors. Next slide, please. Here is a very important issue, and I would really like you to retain this slide or this idea, this policy initiative from my presentation. It's on the guidelines on adaptation strategies and plans. So this is something that we have been developing for EU member states, but of course it will be available also to all of you. And the idea is to help the central authorities, but not only central, also regional authorities to develop their adaptation strategies and plans. The project cycle or preparation cycle is very easy in this case. Basically, we're trying first to prepare the ground. Then we are assessing what the climate change risks and vulnerabilities are, identify what the options are, then assess the individual adaptation options, then implement it, and then monitor and evaluate. So this will be available, we believe, in June already. It should be now. It's at the stage of draft. So in June it should be adopted and by the European Commission and published. And I very much invite you to make use of it. Next slide, please. Here are a few examples on the systemic part of the adaptation, namely on nature-based solution. You have solutions. You've got some examples of the coastal flooding for protection, about green, blue roofs, etc., etc. In my own country, for instance, we are my own country, that is the Czech Republic. We are having a big fight between people advocating for nature-based solutions when it comes to water retention and those advocating for more, let's say, steel and concrete solutions. Yeah. So on one hand, we are trying to enhance the capacity of the landscape to retain water, use the floodplains, enhance organic content, try to avoid erosion, try to revitalize the water streams, etc., etc. And these nature-based solutions are what we believe much more climate adaptation efficient measures as compared to, for instance, concrete and steel flood protection measures or constructing concrete dams. Next slide, please. When we are talking about faster adaptation, then our main vehicle is so-called EU mission on adaptation. And there the idea is to help at least 150 European regions towards climate resilience already by 2030. We've got the Horizon Europe that you may be also aware of, financing programs program. We've got the mission implementation platform that is managing it, and we are using the services of our great colleagues from the joint research centers to support us with scientific knowledge. And that's another issue I would very much like you to retain and to emphasize is the Climate Adapt platform run by the European Environmental Agency. And we will have Angelika talking after me, so I'm sure she will elaborate on it. It's an outstanding platform with excellent examples of concrete policy measures, concrete projects that you might find inspiring. Next slide, please. On the faster adaptation, let me mention what we call climate proofing guidance. Here, the idea is to try to look both at the mitigation and adaptation side of infrastructure projects. So whatever we are going to build in terms of infrastructure, trying to make sure that it is both as climate neutral as possible, but at the same time that also the, let's say, the building is also resilient to climate change, or a road, for instance. Yeah, so looking at both these pillars and trying to integrate it in already design and development of these projects. Next slide, please. And EU climate risk assessment, that is yet another issue that I would believe may be very useful for your work, or abbreviated as UCRA, is not yet born baby. In fact, we are currently working on it very intensely. And basically, the idea is to identify adaptation-related policy priorities, adaptation-related investment priorities, and then support EU policy development with the overall objective to identify and avoid climate-related risks. So we believe that by summer next year, we should be ready, and the document should be available also to you. Next slide, please. And let me mention some of what we consider best practices. In September last year, there was a major conference organized by the Czech European Union presidency and the European Commission in Prague. And there we managed to gather more than 100 leading scientists and practitioners who agreed that to make climate change adaptation efficient, that it's very important to address at least the three following issues at the same time in the same area. And the issues are water retention on the whole surface of the landscape, soil regeneration, and forest resilience to climate change. And all this should be ideally integrated in a landscape plan. If you want to hear more about it, you can click then on the link to Prague Appeal. That is a document prepared by the participants of the conference and approved by the 27 environment ministers, or endorsed by 27 environment ministers of EU member states. And there is also a brochure where you'll be able to find 19 projects that we consider innovative, transformational, bringing new approach to climate change adaptation that might be also interesting for you. Next slide, please. Coming very quickly to the second part of my presentation. So while what I was talking about was on what we do within the European Union, now to mention what we do outside the EU. Next slide, please. So I'll skip the UNFCCC, as Mariam was already talking about it, but to let you know that also we are very active in our G7, G20, and OECD meetings as the European Union. Next slide, please. That on bilateral basis, and here I'm sure you're aware of many of these initiatives. We are engaged in climate diplomacy with many countries of the world. I was listening to the beginning of the conference, so I know that many of you are using the NDC facility. that you are using our assistance when it comes to developing your national adaptation plans, but also we are helping countries with designing and implementing strategies on disaster risk reduction, with climate risks identification, and early warning systems design and implementation. Um, then we are engaged in EU climate dialogues with many countries. We've got many adaptation initiatives in individual countries, and we are trying as much as we can to share best practices. So once again, let me welcome you to use any of these opportunities depending on your interest. Next slide, please. And finally, a little bit about funding. The European Union and its member states are spending approximately 12 billion euros on adaptation worldwide. And there is an obligatory share that when it comes to our assistance to non-EU member states, that at least 35% must be devoted to climate change. Yeah, it's based on the Rio indicators. I'm sure you know it all. Then let me just mention the Team Europe initiative. So basically, the idea is to coordinate well the activities of the European Union or European Union delegation on one hand and EU member states on the other in countries like yours to ensure that our assistance is as efficient as possible. And for you, of course, the most relevant DGs are DG NEAR, then ourselves, DG CLIMA, and at occasions, of course, echo. Yeah, not only when dealing with actual disasters, but also when it comes to disaster prevention. Then we've got Adaptation Without Borders. We've got the Covenant of Mayors that I still remember from my time that I was helping then Mayor of Tbilisi to join the Covenant somewhere around 2009. The Ensure Resilience Global Partnership, then the Global Shield against climate risk, the Global Gateway. So many things, but I don't want to bother you with too many details. But of course, I'm more than happy to reply to any questions you may have. Next slide, please. That's it. Yeah, so thanks a lot for your kind attention.